Before we take a break, we're gonna touch on one bill and then take a break. You know, in these presentations this morning, we're learning about key policies, about crucial investments. Underlying all of this, though, is an understanding that our state's budget, at the end of the day, is a moral document. It proclaims our priorities, it proclaims our values. And to help us understand our state's budget and tax system and discuss the need to tackle a particularly wasteful tax subsidy that is undermining Oregon's ability to house our unhoused neighbors, I'd like to introduce Alejandro Queral, Executive Director at Oregon Center for Public Policy. Alejandro.
Thanks, Britt. Can we put up the slides here? Wonderful, thank you. Well, she does that. First of all, I want to thank you all for being here. You know, the work that you're going to do today is critically important to advancing justice in our state. So thank you from the bottom of my heart. I've been in your seat many times before. I've been in Brett's seat many times before, and I know what a huge lift this is. I also have a tall order. I got to tell you in 15 minutes or less an overview about our tax system, how the general fund works, our state budget, which, as Brett correctly points out, it is a moral document. It's a statement of our values. It's like we're putting our money where our values are. And so we got to think about it that way. But another way that I want to offer you to think about taxes and revenue is really, as Britt pointed out, it's the thing that underlies all the stuff that we're asking for, right? I mean, if we're going to reform how we do and create affordable housing in Oregon, we got to pay for it. If we're going to do better legal services for immigrants, somebody's got to pay for it. We can pay for it. We have the resources in Oregon. We are a state in the richest country in the world, in the history of the world. So don't tell me we can't afford it. It's a choice. It's a choice that we can make. And so today I'm going to give you a quick overview of where we are. I'm going to skip through a lot of slides here because this is a longer presentation. So I'm just going to give you a quick overview of the tax system. And of course, I don't have to tell you that our taxes and our revenue pays for a lot of good stuff, from traffic lights to healthcare services to education and so forth. But the reality is that our revenue system continues to fall short. One of the things that you will probably experience today as you are asking for support to for some of the bills that you're going to be working on is how we're going to pay for it. The pie is too small. Well, folks, we have ways of making the pie bigger. But let me give you a sense of what makes for a good tax system, because it's not just about making the pie bigger, it's about making it bigger the right way. And to do that, we have to anchor it in a set of values that have really informed Oregon Center for Public Policy's prescriptions for policy reform on the revenue side of the equation. Incidentally, for those of you who don't know, Oregon Center for Public Policy is a progressive think tank that works to advance economic justice for all Oregonians through research and communications. And so you should check us out if you have a chance, ocpp.org. We've published many research papers on a variety of issue areas, certainly including taxes. So check us out. We also have a number of papers and an analysis of SB 976, which I will get to in a minute, which is the mortgage interest deduction reform bill that we'll talk about and you'll be hopefully advocating on. But back to the value. So the first value that we gotta center our thinking about revenue is progressivity. And I just skipped one, so I'm not gonna go back. But progressivity, this is one that you're probably familiar with. It's fundamental to tax fairness. Is the idea that the taxes that people pay need to be proportional to what they make, right? So the question that we want to ask is, are the poor paying proportionately more in taxes, in which case that tax is regressive? And on the other hand, if we're asking the rich to pay proportionally more on taxes, we can say that that bill is progressive. As simple as that, not a foreign concept. The second one is one of adequacy. Is the revenue that we're raising sufficient to pay for the services that Oregonians need, including education, including healthcare, including immigration reform, and so many other things that are on the list. But we have to have enough resources to make that happen. And of course, we have to anchor the distribution, the allocation of those resources through an equity lens. How do we use those resources? How do we raise those revenues in a way that either advances equity or doesn't create or exacerbate disparities? And what I'm going to show you here in a couple of minutes is that the current system that we do have, while one would say is the tax system is mildly progressive, when you look at the whole, not just the taxes that we pay, but all the deductions, all the stuff that we kind of, the passes that we give to rich people in some ways are actually, when you take the entire thing, it's actually a fairly regressive system. So let's just review real quick. How do we raise revenue? For those of you at the back, I'll try to describe some things. I know this is small, but essentially these lines show the various top taxes that make up most of Oregon's revenue, and the personal income tax constitutes the vast majority, around $24 billion per biennium. This is for 21, 23. These are updated figures. But at the end of the day, I don't want you to get hung up too much on the exact figures because there's fluctuation depending on how the economy is doing. But the personal income tax is the vast majority of it, and property taxes is the second highest at $16 billion. Property taxes, as you know, are the local taxes that local jurisdictions raise to pay for services like fire and police and education and so forth, right? So there's been some limitations. We could get into it, and if there were questions later, I can talk to folks about measures 5 and 50 and the impact that had on property taxes. But nonetheless, $16 billion is still a lot of money that helps provide for those services. There's a whole host of other excise taxes, unemployment insurance tax, which is different from others in the sense that it's allocated to a specific fund to support the state's unemployment insurance system. And then the other thing that I want to point out here is that corporate income taxes, until recently, didn't even make the top 5. And that changed, of course, with implementation of the corporate activities tax, which is raising close to $2 billion to fund our education system in the state. All right. So our state budget, the general fund, is around $29 billion. The majority of that, for about 43%, goes to pay for education. I don't know why my slide is so messed up, but the other one is health and human services at about 30%, and public safety. So that's where our money goes to. 16% is others, a whole host of things in there. But our source of state budget dollars, again, personal income tax is about 83% of this pie. Corporate income taxes, lottery, and then finally the state tax make up almost the remainder. Interesting. There's been some variation. So, because the personal income tax is the vast majority of our source of revenue, I just wanted to quickly review how it works, because marginal tax rates are not like an intuitive thing that we can understand, but basic gist of it is here that the lowest tax rate is 4.75%. So everybody making under $7,499 or under $7,500 would pay a 4.75% up onto that. And so on, right? So the next category, anyone paying between $7,500 and $18,900, 6.75. The key point that I want to bring you to, and let's see if this works. I have a little, there we go, look at that. So the key point here is that this is where the progressivity of our income brackets really is eliminated, because what you see here is that at 8.75% marginal tax rate, anyone making, and by the way, these are joint tax filers, so if you're like trying to work out the math and you're just, these are joint tax filers, so a single tax filer would be about half of these figures. But essentially, a couple filing jointly making $19,000 would pay the same rate as what Phil Knight pays, or someone making up to $250,000, up to $250,000. So they're paying exactly the same rate. So in that sense, it's a mildly regressive system. But on balance, when you take everything together, not just what we pay from our personal income taxes, but all the deductions that we take, all the tax credits, where are we? Where do we land? Well, we've looked at that. And the reality is that there are many, including the mortgage interest deduction, many loopholes, tax cuts, deductions that actually make our system more aggressive. So I want to focus on the mortgage interest deduction because I'm running short on time, but also because there's an important bill that you all will hopefully be lobbying for, which is SB 976. All right, let me look at some of the details here because this is important. First of all, I want to show you why this is such a critical piece of legislation to work on. The mortgage interest deduction in the States, as it currently works right now, not only can you deduct on your principal residence, but you can deduct on a vacation home, for example. And at the end of the day, what happens is that the majority of the dollars from that mortgage interest deduction flows to the top 20% of income earners. About 59% of those dollars flows. And this is true not just in Oregon, but throughout the country. In fact, the U.S. Treasury Department conducted a study looking at mortgage interest deduction distributions. And just to look at the exact numbers, because it is important to highlight how this particular deduction actually helps drive inequities along racial and ethnic lines, and it helps drive inequities between rural and urban localities or counties. So, for example, white families, this is nationwide statistics, but just to give you an idea, white families make up about 67% of the national tax filers, right? But capture 84% of the mortgage interest deduction. Whereas Latino families, which make up, let's see here, 15% of tax filers but get 7% of the benefits. And black families are about 11% of tax filers but get only 4% of those benefits, right? So this adds up to $26 billion flowing to white families and about $5 billion left for everyone else. So that's clearly neither progressive nor equitable. So how do we start to fix this? Well, at the state level, SB 976 gives us an opportunity to do this. First of all, it will scale back the mortgage interest deduction to the state for all filing types, starting at $200,000 in adjusted gross income, right? So there's a cap now where we start reducing it, and at $250,000, you can't claim that mortgage interest deduction. Moreover, we will eliminate the ability to claim a mortgage interest deduction on that second home, the home that is not a primary residence. So you will be able to claim that mortgage interest deduction for your primary residence only, which seems fair because ultimately, I mean, let's go back to the history. How was the mortgage interest deduction? Why was it put in place? The intent was to promote home ownership. But the way that it's structured is not leading to that. In fact, I would say that it's not promoting home ownership, it's taking opportunities away from home ownership. So how do we distribute, how do we allocate those dollars in a way that actually gets us to that goal? So SB 976 accomplishes that, and it also results in the trimming of about $200 million off the top of more than $900 million that is the cost of the mortgage interest deduction currently. So when legislators today tell you that we can't afford this or that, the other thing for like, what was the bill that we were just discussing, the HB 3482, loans so that folks can move through the red tape to pay and create affordable housing. One of the things that I can assure you we'll hear today is, we can't afford that. Well, guess what? We can. SB 976 will get us there, right? So you have your task cut out for you. I'd love to talk to you more about revenue things, but my time is short. I will leave you with that. And I'd be happy to answer any questions. OCPP.org, we have a lot more information both on SB 976, but all the stuff that I talked about today, we've analyzed, we've digested, and hopefully we're providing you with the resources and materials you need to get the work accomplished. So thank you all for your work today, and good luck. Good stuff.